Welcome to Worth Live, and thank you all for joining this week's episode of the Next Normal series on what the future of horse racing looks like and a continuation of our theme around women in sport. Firstly, I hope you and your loved ones are keeping well during what continues to be a challenging time for so many people. I'm Juliet Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our special guests today, Shannon Bishop Arvin, President and CEO of Keeneland, and Kathleen Entwistle, Managing Director and Private Wealth Advisor at Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management. Hi, both of you.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Our intention at Worth is to create conversations that help inspire and inform our community, many of whom are investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders who want to leave a positive impact on the world and to help create a more inclusive and equal economy and society for the benefit of everyone. And we call that Worth Beyond Wealth. So we hope you enjoy this session and find it enjoyable and valuable. Forward thinking has really been the essence of this series that we have done in partnership with Kathy for the past 11 months now. The Next Normal, where Worth is looking ahead to what the world looks like in this new environment that we're now all living in. COVID and the global pandemic has changed everything, not least of all sports, and one sport in particular that's had to evolve in the face of the pandemic has been horse racing. And Shannon Bishop Arvin stepped into the role of President and CEO of Keeneland as the first woman to serve as President and CEO of the racetrack during this turbulent time. So we're thrilled to be joined by Shannon and Kathy as we discuss how and what we can expect from the sport in the future and what it's been like for Shannon to take on this leadership position in a traditionally male-dominated space, how sports is changing coming off the pandemic, and what it means for her to be the first woman to serve as president and CEO. A few housekeeping rules before we get started, which I know you're all very familiar with by now. We welcome questions and comments from you. If you set your chat at the bottom of the screen to all attendees and panelists, then please do share your comments, thoughts, questions, and we'll weave those into the conversation as we go, and also leave some time at the end. So let's kick off. Firstly, some introductions. Shannon, you've had a really fascinating career. I'd love just to, first of all, check in how you're doing personally, but also love to hear from you briefly about your background and how you became involved in this field.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. I am sitting at Keeneland Racecourse in Lexington, Kentucky, which is where I was born and raised. I did work in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years and then came back here to law school, which is what led me in part to this path where I find myself now. I practiced law at a local firm here for 18 years. And I did a lot of equine law. I did a lot of estate planning law. A lot of the work that I did throughout my legal career was about building relationships. And so in the process of representing a lot of equine owners and representing Keeneland and in representing the Breeders' Cup and other industry organizations, I think developing those relationships really is what led me to where I sit right now. My family does have a pretty unique relationship with the track. My grandfather was the first general manager of Keeneland. We were formed in 1936 and he was here until 1971. So he really physically oversaw the building of the track and the renovation of our grounds. And then my dad was a lawyer for Keeneland, and I was lucky to get to practice with him until he passed away in 2008. He actually grew up on these grounds. And he was, as I said, their lawyer and also one of our 3 trustees when he passed away in 2008. So we have a special connection to Keeneland, but one of the amazing things about this place is that I think everybody in this community and in the equine community feels a connection to Keeneland. Everybody has a Keeneland story. So it's a special place, and I'm really excited to be leading it.
Thanks, Shannon. And what age were you when you were first there? And because I guess your grandfather being there, horses were in your life at a very young age.
They were, although we do a much better job now of engaging our fans and having young children to the races. When I was growing up, my mother would have kept me at home with a babysitter. So I definitely spent time out here. But my first real memories of Keeneland were working here. I worked the switchboard. I worked in the sales office. I kind of took every job they'd give me around here learning the business.
And you spent some time in DC as well, right?
I did. I worked on Capitol Hill for a couple of years, long enough to know. I actually really found the policy interesting, which made me an outcast because everybody else loved the politics. And I found I didn't love the politics so much, but I learned a lot from working there and had a great time. It's a great city.
It's great to have you on. And Kathy, I want to welcome you. Would love to do a personal check-in. And we were just saying how you've both gone through quite big career transitions in the past 12 months, which I think is interesting in a time of such turbulence as well. But if you could just explain what you do and also your connection in with sport as well.
Okay, sure. So Kathy Entwistle, I'm a private wealth advisor, managing director at Morgan Stanley. And what I do is I help people with their personal wealth to help them shepherd it through all stages of their life and all stages of their business. So I also work in this, I'm a global director of sports and entertainment at Morgan Stanley, which means that we have additional knowledge and experience working with people in the sports arena or in entertainment. So a lot of different things come up there, and we'll bring our expertise to the table for that as well.
Thank you, Kathy. And so let's start with like taking a step back, because often we talk about basketball or football or some of those kind of mainstream sports. Before we talk about how horse racing has been impacted in the last year, Shannon, could you just give us a bit of context about the sport and just some of the sort of key milestones or sort of ways it's evolved over the past 10, 20, 30 plus years?
Sure. So horse racing, I think it was traditionally called the sport of kings. I'm not sure we refer to it as the sport of kings anymore. It's an unusual sport in that the horse, the animal is the pinnacle. I mean, that's what everybody follows. That's what I think draws people to the sport, the beauty and the majesty of the horse. So as the sport has evolved, we have a Triple Crown series. Probably everybody's most familiar with the Kentucky Derby. And the Kentucky Derby, many of you may know, is not held at Keeneland, but it's held at Churchill Downs, which is in Louisville, right down the street from us. And we're actually ramping up for that season now. We'll hold our April race meet in April, and we'll have some prep races for the Kentucky Derby, which is traditionally the first Saturday in May. This past year, it was very strange because it was in September, so all of our time clocks were off. So I'd say that's the most well-known. Probably the two greatest days of racing from my view and where I sit, and as this event has evolved over the years since it started in 1984, is the Breeders' Cup World Championships, which are where it's 2 days of fantastic racing, $30+ million in prize money. And the best of the best come and compete over those 2 days from all over the world. So that's an event to watch that everybody in the industry and hopefully the broader audience watches as well. We were able to host that even in the midst of a pandemic in November of 2020, and Keeneland will be hosting it again in 2022.
And clearly horse racing, like many other sports, has been impacted over the past year. Notably, you mentioned the Kentucky Derby having only sort of open to a limited number of people. How has the sport been impacted by the pandemic, and specifically, how has Keeneland sort of risen to meet the challenges that the last year has presented itself?
It has been an interesting year, to say the least, and I'm sure everybody feels that way. We were forced to cancel our April race meet. We race in October and April at Keeneland. We kind of have a boutique race meet, and then we also have a number of horse sales throughout the year. We were forced to cancel our April race meet, which we hadn't done but one time during World War II. But at the time, we just felt like there wasn't a way we could feel comfortable doing that and keeping people safe. And that's really been our first and foremost priority through all of this. How do we keep our employees safe? How do we keep our patrons safe? How do we keep our horses safe? for racing, horses have to be taken care of every day, whether they're entered in a race that afternoon or not. So it really wasn't a big stretch for our sport to be able to take the training in the morning to racing in the afternoon, which we were able to start again in June. The sport in general started racing again in June. And we persevered. I mean, I have marveled at the resiliency and the optimism of our industry. Really, all communities in which I've been involved, I've marveled at the resiliency and the optimism. But we have seen some silver linings. Our TV viewership was up about 60%. Our wagering handle stayed really strong throughout this time. I think a lot of people were home and were watching and chose to wager. I think we did gain some new fans that we're working to hold on to. And I think the key to what we've had to do is to take the facts as you have them on a given day and make the best decisions you possibly can make given those facts, recognizing that the facts could change the following week and you have to be flexible enough to adjust to those.
And I've got one question on the business, because it's an interesting business structure in terms of, and you mentioned your father and your grandfather worked there, but did you say it's a B Corp?
We actually, we are similar to a modern day B Corp. We are an organization. When we were formed, our mission has been the same since 1936, and that's to be a model racetrack and sales company. We don't pay any dividends to shareholders. Everything that we make is reinvested into our community and into our industry. So it's really it's so nice to be able to work for an organization where the guiding principle is what's the right thing to do. I mean, that's it, full stop. That is always our guiding principle. We don't have to worry about dividends or, shareholders being upset about decisions we've made. A lot of people feel invested in the decisions we do make because of that connection everybody feels to Keeneland. So that's a lot of responsibility and an obligation, but it's not for financial gain. It truly is what's best for our business.
And we often talk about, and with given Kathy's background around investing and alternative investing and alternative asset classes, are investing in horses one of those, or is it really for the people that are most passionate about horses? Is it a good investment?
You asking me or Kathy? I hope we have the same answer.
I'd love to hear both of your views on that.
Okay, so I do have lots of clients who own horses, and I have clients that have shipped their, not shipped, I won't say shipped, but their horses have traveled from, Florida to the UK or back, or, different areas of the world. And I would say my clients treat their horses as well as any of us would want to be treated at the highest standard. And these are very important relationships to them, almost, if I can say that. And we don't necessarily look at it from the investment standpoint in terms of what is the return, because they might not be racing their horses, they might not be looking to win a race and take the big pot, but they're looking at it more from the return of personal satisfaction, the passion, the energy and time, and from that standpoint, that's just personal experience with my clients who own horses. I'm sure that there are certainly ways to invest and to reap that reward as well. And also sometimes when you're, if you are selling a horse, you could potentially make a profit there depending on what's going on. So I'd say, just like every investment, it's for the individual. You have to really think of it for that person and what that means to them and what the return on the investment is. And like we said, it could be money, it could be personal, satisfaction, enjoyment, all sorts of different things. But I'm really interested to hear what Shannon has to say as well.
So I think it's interesting because some people have gotten involved in the horse business, some very successful, wealthy people. And for whatever reason, they've gotten caught up in the passion and they haven't used the same discipline in the horse business that they use in their own separate businesses that probably made them so successful. But there are many people who have invested in the horse business and really have made a lot of money. It's a significant market. I mean, our annual sales through our auction, we have a live auction in September, November, January, and April. And our numbers are anywhere from 450 million annually to 815 million annually. So there are significant dollars going through the auction ring. And there are a couple of different plays for investments. You know, some people, particularly the ones that love the passion of the sport and attending the races. You know, I've heard more stories from people that say, I went to the races with my grandfather and we had the best time and I want to pass that on to my children. And they really use it as a way to get their family together. That's one angle for investment. There was a filly named Swiss Skydiver. You all may have heard of her. She won the Preakness in 2020. She was bought in our auction ring for $35,000. And she had $1.8 million in earnings. And she'll go on to be a brood mare. And the Callahans, I'd say, did very well with Swiss Skydiver. The breeding end of the business is a whole nother angle. And, you know, if you invest in mares, then you pay to mate your mare to a stallion. There's a lot of science and passion, and people are so knowledgeable about pedigrees. They're kind of like savants. And this whole end, there are people, that's their sole focus in this business, is that breeding aspect of it. And that's probably a more conservative play when you're investing in mares. And then the stallion market, you know, a Kentucky Derby horse, Secretariat, they say, is the first horse that was syndicated, the first syndicated stallion, which basically means people bought shares in the stallion. And if you owned one of the 40 shares, it gave you the right to breed your mare to the stallion. So that syndication was 12 million, which was a crazy amount of money in 1973. And now, you know, stallion rights and somebody purchasing a colt right before the Kentucky Derby can be as high as 65 million. And stud fees can be as high as 500,000 just to breed your mare to the stallion. So it's a fascinating business aspect, and people operate within that at different levels and in different aspects. And then you also have the consigners, who are the people that sell the horses, who may not be the wealthiest ones, but they love the horse, they love the sport, they love the business. And so that's how they make their living. And then they generally enjoy investing on their own. So they're not investing at the same level maybe a high net worth individual would, but they're still playing within the game, and they love it.
It's great, like great insight and perspective. I really enjoy listening to that as well. And I agree with you. Like my first experience, I was in elementary school and I had a friend whose family owned some horses and that raced. Although I'm up in New Jersey, and it was the races where they would be in the little carriages behind the horse, as opposed to I can't remember if there's a differentiating word for that, but it is, you know, it's super exciting. And I did harness, thank you. And I did see, you know, firsthand the reaping of the rewards of owning a horse and investing that way. And I would say too, you know, obviously diversification of any portfolio is important. So to be able to have a sliver, but like anything else, you either need to really know what you're doing, or you need to have somebody you're working with to help you navigate that. So it would not be for the novice investor. It would be for somebody who's really either got a real passion and a real understanding, or somebody who will find the right person to help them navigate through that.
Absolutely. We're kind of notorious for saying that we don't like contracts, but being a lawyer, I always said, look, I can make it 2 pages, but you've got to have something in writing. So there's nothing to be afraid of there to say, well, that's just done by handshake. That's not true. It's a legitimate business, and there are ways to protect yourself for certain.
It's such a brilliant breakdown that you gave, though, of the different business aspects of horses, because I had no idea of those sort of different parts, and there are some high numbers there, which Alexander just commented on as well. I'd like to move to the aspect of being a female executive in sports. Before we do, there is a question from John Day, who asks, given the world part of the Breeders' Cup Charter, what does Shannon think of the possibility of the 2-day event being conducted at a European or South American racetrack?
I think it would be fabulous. Or maybe somewhere in Asia. I mean, I think there have been discussions, the Breeders' Cup moves around where they have the event. So they've kind of gotten on this fairly regular rotation with Santa Anita and Del Mar, both in California, Keeneland and Churchill Downs, both in Kentucky. But I think they are definitely open to looking at international locations, and I think that would be fabulous.
Thank you for that question, John, and keep them coming. So, Shannon, you stepped into the role of President and CEO of Keeneland in January. So it's like literally 34 days now that you've been in the role.
That's right.
What's it been like taking over leading Keeneland through this time, and also just sort of the perception of a female stepping into this role for the first time?
It's interesting because having worked in this industry for nearly 20 years, and even the law business in a lot of respects can feel like a man's world sometimes. And I think, and my dad helped me a lot with this too and taught me the lesson. I just never let myself believe that being a woman was a limitation. And I'm really lucky, and I know not all people are as lucky. I'm really lucky because I've worked with quality mentors and people, men and women, who had the confidence in me that I could do it. That I've been able to just keep going. And some days it's just waking up and saying, okay, another day, one foot in front of the other, I can do this. I do have 2 children who are 9 and 11, 2 daughters and a husband. And they're super supportive. Some days my children understand better than others why I'm not home right in time for dinner. But I think it's just truly putting one foot in front of the other, being easy on yourself some days, because some days I'm going to be a better mom, and some days I was a better lawyer, and some days I'm going to be a better racetrack executive, and just trying to find that balance, which I think is a constant struggle for certain. Whatever you decide to do, I think that's a struggle. But it was one for me that I found worthwhile. I hope it's a good example for my kids. And I hope it's a good example for anybody out there trying to get to that next level, that it's not perfect. It's not always pretty, but just keep trying because you can get there.
Shannon, how many women are in the world that you're in right now in an executive level?
At the president and CEO level, I'm not aware of another female head of a racetrack. Belinda Stronach owns the Stronach track. So she is the chairman, I believe is her title. Our executive team of 8, there are 2 other women on the executive team with me. And we're constantly looking for ways to incorporate more women, diverse candidates. We're really looking closely at that because I think we all need to do better with that. And we by no means have found the right combination just by sitting me in this seat. We've got a lot more work to do. And I think my board is supportive of that. And I think the industry is supportive of that. I mean, I will say, I feel, again, it goes back to those relationships. Anything that you do, to me, goes back to relationships. It's a relationship business. But I think those relationships I built with men and women throughout my whole career have led me to sit here and be supported, and in large part by the industry, which is critically important for what I need to do here.
So, like, one more question in terms of it's really just a rhetorical question in a sense, but you're obviously quite talented and qualified, and you also happen to be a woman. So if you're qualified, what about being the female part is important that you bring to the position?
You know, it's an interesting question because, and hopefully I won't offend any men that are listening when I say this, but I think one of the things that has helped me find success, and obviously not in everything that I've done, but where I sit now, it's kind of my approach to things, which I think tends to be a more feminine approach. I was not a litigator. I didn't like the fight of being in a courtroom. I liked the negotiation and sitting around a table and having everybody walk away at the end of the day feeling okay, feeling like they've gotten a little something. And we, we're really excited because the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act has just passed Congress, which will put, I think it's a transformational game changer for our sport, in that we can finally, instead of having 38 racing jurisdictions with rules that slightly differ, we can have a national body with oversight. So that is a huge progress for us. To get to that point, it involved a lot of different industry groups sitting around the table. And I said at one point early on, we will be successful if everybody walks away from this table and says, that was my idea. That was my idea. I've been saying this for years, and it's what happened. And I think that's in large part, there were very many people that were involved in that, but that to me tends to be a feminine characteristic, to try to forge those negotiations. And I think that's really helped me throughout my career.
Great answer. Makes sense.
What did it mean for you to step into this role? What did it mean for you personally, Shannon?
It was overwhelming a lot of the time. It feels less overwhelming now, because once you're in something, you just, again, it's that process of one foot in front of the other, and you can't stop and be paralyzed by the enormity of it. But for me, and I think in talking to my mom too, I mean, definitely the connection to my dad is special for me. And because he did pass away in 2008, and I don't know that he could have imagined. It's, sometimes people say, well, of course your family connection, you'd end up sitting in that seat, but really that hasn't been my goal. For the past couple of years, people have said, you ought to think about that. And I just kind of said, well, if they ask, I'll consider it. And they did ask in March. And I went through the process and ended up here. But that family connection really is special to me. And I think certainly it's part of Dad's legacy. And we were very close, and he died at 64, which is too young for him to have left us. So that part really is special.
It's so funny, Shannon, saying that, and I'm going to turn it a little bit. I hope that's okay. But I got into the financial business. My dad was in the financial business, and he was a CEO of a company and a leader, and very, very big impact on me. He also died young, 65. So I agree with you. I think that's too young. And I think back to where when he passed away, I was just starting in this business, and I think it would be so cool, right, for them to see like where we are now, or the impact we're making. It's like, and to also have that strong male figure, obviously, who was, very helpful in forging a road or a path that, and gave you that strength and support to know that you were capable of doing all of these things and doing them well. I think is so important. I think we all need to have those people and supporters, but to have it as a family member, like a father figure or a father himself, is great. And it also helps bring that whole idea together, that we have all different perspectives, right, and we all come from different backgrounds, but male, female, whatever color we are, whatever religion we are, we all have something to bring to the table that is going to make a positive impact, or share a different view and open up everyone else's eyes to, well, maybe this is a better way to do it. Let's give it a go.
Absolutely. We're lucky.
Yeah. I started this career in 2001, and I never would have done it, I don't think, if I knew what a high failure rate the business had back then. And I had no idea that it was, a man's, business or anything like that. And I think sometimes, a little bit of fearlessness is helpful when you go and start something new. Absolutely. And I guess the other point you and I both said, we both changed careers. I had a big career transition during COVID. So when you were originally starting to talk about it and say, it was a little overwhelming, I said, yeah, because you did it during COVID. That's right. One big reason. There's other reasons, but that's a big part, right?
Right. It's changed the way we see the world.
Well, I mean, the career transitions are overwhelming anyway, but yeah, layer on the year that we've just had, it's it is challenging. So much.
Think about it too. Yeah, Juliet, like Shannon did just take a new job and have to meet all people and figure out, the logistics of everything and all these transitions. But Then it was like, okay, normally we do it this way,
Yeah.
but we can't do it that way anymore. Now what? And trying to, troubleshoot very quickly, very early on in a very significant way. That's a big deal.
And
in some ways it's liberating, honestly. I mean, we are a company with a lot of traditions, and I've kind of said to our team, okay, let's take the best of our traditions. Not all our traditions are good. Let's take the best of our traditions and innovate. And there are some people who have been here a long time who probably would have resisted that a little bit more if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. And it's helped us open our minds to think about new ways to approach issues.
You also both have daughters, and there's an interesting question that just came through. How important is it for you that they see you in these roles, and to what extent are you involving them in your jobs and in your business? Shannon, let's start with you.
I think another silver lining of COVID is that unfortunately we have all these Zoom calls, but we're not hiding our children under the desk. So if I was talking to a client when I was working from home, lots of times one of my daughters would come up and give me a hug. And I thought that was so refreshing, because that is that's the most important part of my life right now. I mean, it's family first. I truly believe that. And Bill Thomason, who was my predecessor, is a great family man. His daughters are grown. He has great children. But he said, have fun with this and don't hide them. Let them feel like this is their place too, and let them be part of this. And I kind of looked at him and said, it's on a big stakes day. You think it's okay for them to be in the director's room? We haven't had one yet because we haven't been able to welcome fans back yet. But he said, yes, in some way that's okay. So I think it's just letting them be a part of it and bringing them into the everyday and helping them feel proud of this place also.
Kathy, how much do you involve your kids in what you do?
Well, I have 2 daughters and a son, and my son actually works on our team, so he's very involved. But my daughters, Sarah had worked with us for about a year while she was transitioning from a financial job with Goldman Sachs to a culinary position, going to culinary school and then ultimately working for Blue Apron. So she worked with us and did marketing for a year, and she was great. She brought all the processes she learned at Goldman over to us. But I think they know what I do, and I really didn't really think twice about it. They're very aware and involved. Sometimes I would have client events, and some of them would come to the client events, so that's nice as well. But what was really interesting is seeing their perspective somewhere along the way, where I was always mom, but now it was like, oh, this is mom, and now, now their friends are, sharing, stories with each other, like, oh, did you see, hey, I saw your mom on Bloomberg, or I saw your mom on CNBC, and it's all of a sudden it like elevates you for some reason. But I think they're proud, and I think it's important to, you can do anything, and you can also have fun doing it. Like, I don't feel like my work is work. I feel like it's I'm getting paid to do something I really love, which to me is like amazing. So I think those are important things to share with your family, finding your passion. And usually when you find something you love doing, you'll do it well and you'll be successful. It's the way it works.
And what about Shannon? You touched on diversity in this field, and horse racing has, been a pretty exclusive sport, and is pretty male heavy. And you touched on you're focusing on sort of broadening that out. What do you think it will take to bring more diversity into the industry and into the sport? And I know there was a question from Tamara about, are we likely to see an increase in female jockeys emerging and making a name for themselves?
Well, I think it's so important, again, back to the relationships, but making people feel welcome. I think when we can have fans back at the track again and make it accessible for them, it goes back to me to that connection with the horse. And I think we need to make those connections more broadly with more people. And there are new innovative ways for people to get involved in the sport. Authentic is a horse that won The Breeders' Cup, won the Kentucky Derby last year, and he was owned in part by an organization called My Racehorse. So there were a lot of people who had invested in that horse for a couple of $100s. So that's another way, I think, to bring the sport to more people in a more inclusive way.
And to what extent do you look at other sports, and do you have like coaches and mentors in other sport industries to help kind of apply how you need to adapt at Keeneland?
We definitely do. And during the pandemic in particular, we have looked at other sports and other sporting venues in terms of how many fans are they having, what's safe, what's a good idea during COVID. But there's certainly examples of other sport, golf has exploded. NASCAR for a while exploded and caused us to think, okay, should we change the way we have advertising, for example, on jockey silks, or permit advertising on their pants? So I think, again, we just need to constantly innovate, and that coordination with other sports can only make us stronger, and the coordination with each other. I think our industry has historically been potentially divided. We're in different, your main racing states are Florida, Kentucky, New York, and California. And I think historically we haven't been as united as we should on really important issues. And again, a silver lining of COVID and this time in which we found ourselves, we're working together so much better than we ever have. And I think that'll be really positive for us going forward.
And what about some of the ways that you've had to engage fans? Has digital and technology played a more prominent role than it has done in the past?
Absolutely, because unfortunately we haven't been able to have fans here for a year now. We're looking at our April race meet and seeing how we can safely allow some number of fans back. But we've done Keeneland at home. We've more broadly promoted our racing so people can watch them at home. And then on the sales front too, that's been fascinating, because we had been working to have digital sales and have people have the ability to bid when they weren't physically present. But that really was sped up, that whole project. And so in September and November and in our January sales, we had bidding online, which was a game changer for us. And the numbers were staggering. It was over $20 million in sales on the internet. And I don't see that going away.
Wow. We have another question from Alexander Larson to Shannon. Do you think your family connection to Keeneland will help you as you form those same connections to the track for fans?
Absolutely. I think again it's relationships and telling stories, and I think definitely it will help.
And moving on to the future, what does the future of horse racing look like for you? Because I imagine there's been something, obviously a huge impact this year based on the pandemic, but has that forced opportunity or accelerated change that you feel the industry needed?
Yes, technology first and foremost. I think we have to start thinking about where our races are shown, how they're shown, accepting the likelihood that a lot of people may not be physically here, but how do we show our product to more people? How do we forge that connection with the horse and let people see that? Is it going to be on NBC, or is it going to be on a digital platform? Advanced deposit wagering companies, we have one, but it's not a huge material part of our business. How much a part of our business should it be? And how do we deal with sports betting, which is becoming legal in a lot of different states? And we're working together just to make sure we stay on the forefront so that we're not forgotten with the other sports, so we can be presented to more people.
And Shannon, you mentioned advertisers. Are you seeing a sort of more of an emergence of mainstream brands and advertisers wanting to advertise in this industry, or is it still quite niche in terms of those advertisers that get involved and back the industry?
A lot of, Keeneland is unique from other tracks because our community is so involved in our racetrack. So a lot of our sponsors do tend to be, they may be national companies, but they have a presence in Lexington. We're definitely working on trying to engage more sponsors on a national and international level. And Breeders' Cup has certainly helped with that too. You know, Longines has been a big sponsor of theirs for years. So we're always working to grow that. Sponsorship is tough right now in a pandemic, you know, so many people do, Kathy, you probably know this firsthand, you know, some national companies have said, we will not have in-person events. And a big part of the reason that a sponsor has been interested in sponsoring is because they want the benefit of having that event at a race meet. So it's changing the way people are looking at that. And we're working with our sponsors closely. And I'll keep trying to work to attract new sponsors.
So how do the have you been televising the races without fans? How has that worked?
We've been televising them without fans, and then we have an arrangement with TVG, which is a horse racing network. Yeah. And then we broadcast all of our races, and then we've had a number of them on NBC.
Kathy, what do you think the future of horse racing will look like?
That's a great question. I think that Shannon's point is well taken, and it's a point that you and I have gone over many times over the last year, and that's digital transformation and the fact that technology had to make this huge shift, you know, and the acceleration of it went from, you know, a 10-year period of, you know, that digital transformation would have normally taken, got accelerated so quickly into the 6-month time period. And we're seeing the companies and the industries that are faring well are the ones that are positioned now with this digital transformation in the forefront, and making decisions that way. So the fact that Shannon brought that up and, you know, and concurred with that, it makes complete sense. I think it is about trying to look forward and see where, you know, where the fans will be, where the advertising will be, where the opportunities are, and to try to position the industry that way as quickly and as best as possible to be able to react and provide the experience in this new way. And there'll still be, people will still want to get together when we can, but in the meantime, you have to provide a different solution and know that going forward, the solution might be multiple solutions. It won't just be digital transformation, and it just won't be in person. It will be a little bit of both, I would think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that, you know, that to your point, there are things that will have accelerated and that will continue to stick during this time. And I think more of that hybrid way to reach fans, I think is the future. I can't see it going back to kind of only being physical, but I might be wrong. I feel
like the jockeys, like with the race jockeys and COVID and social distancing and, you know, opportunities for vaccines, like, is there a pecking order in the horse race world of who gets vaccines or who doesn't?
We're working really hard to get as many people access to vaccines as possible. You know, we've got relationships with University of Kentucky and their healthcare program. There's a company here called Wild Health who's helped us with our COVID testing. We've been tested once a week since July. And our COVID safety protocols for our sales, when people were welcomed on the grounds, if you were working in a barn or working with one of the consigners selling the horses who tended to be in barns areas that were a little bit tighter, you had to have a negative COVID test to be able to get on the grounds. So with respect to jockeys, they too had to have negative COVID tests to be able to come ride at our race meets. We kept them separated by geography from where they came. You know, the jockey colony from New York stayed in one temporary facility. So we tried to be really careful about that. And I hope we can get everybody access to vaccines as quickly as possible.
There's a few questions that have come in before we finish. So one of them, Shannon, for you, when do you see genetic engineering affecting horse racing, and what are you doing preemptively?
You know, so the thoroughbred is only qualified as a thoroughbred if they were produced by live cover. So that means there is no artificial insemination for thoroughbred racing. The Jockey Club is a breed registry for thoroughbreds, and that's their requirement. So I don't know that genetic engineering will have much of a place as a result of that rule.
Interesting. And the other one was, what would you say to people who have a negative outlook on the horse racing industry, and those that are more focused on things like animal cruelty and things like that?
I would welcome them to come and let us show them around, because these horses truly, their houses are nicer than my house. I mean, they are treated like royalty. And we also were working really hard. I mean, the safety of the horse is the foundation of Keeneland, and really it has to be the foundation for the industry. We're a founding member of the Thoroughbred Safety Coalition, which is, again, as I mentioned, a number of tracks that have come together to say, okay, what makes sense for the horse? And that's everything from, you know, when is giving horse Advil okay and in the best interest of the horse, and when is it performance enhancing, and trying to draw those lines to do, again, what's right for the horse, because that's always at the base, at the foundation of every decision we make. We've hired our equine safety director, who's on the track every morning looking at horses, trying to make sure that every horse that's out there is sound and fit to be running on the track. We've invested a lot in science and art on track surfaces to decide what provides the safest track surface. Our dirt surface actually has a drainage system underneath it. And then again, a lot of science and technology into what comprises the dirt and what makes it the most consistent, so it's the safest for a horse. So I think, again, that's about education and welcoming people to see more under the tent, because I think that'll make them feel comfortable.
Yeah. And a question for you both as female leaders and as a CEO, given the devastating impact on women this past 12 months has had and the number of women leaving the workforce, what advice would you give for women that are in senior leadership positions, and what advice would you give to businesses to try and help retain women in the workforce whilst it's so difficult right now? That was a long one. Kathy, do you want to take that on first?
Sure. I mean, this has certainly been a topic, keeping, retaining women in the workforce well before COVID, and COVID just again highlighted the issue. So, for example, we found in the financial services industry that we had a lot of diversity and a lot of females working in finance until about the mid-level executives. But between going from the mid-level to that higher C-suite level or higher level, there's a huge drop off, and that's usually because it's childbearing years. There's different needs that are coming, and that's where the issue happens. And we saw with COVID, women have to, we take care of our families, we take care of everything, and we work and do all these other things. And at some point, something has to give. And just like Shannon said earlier, family first. I think that is probably what everybody puts as a priority, I hope. And that's why the decisions have been made, because we're not creating some sort of an environment where women can stay. I mean, I remember I started out way back in the late 80s at Manufacturers Hanover Trust Company, financial bank. And when I had gotten pregnant with my first child, they offered, which was really quite progressive in 1988 or 1990, I should say, they offered 3 days a week with another woman who was having a baby. And I would be like Monday to Wednesday, and she would be Wednesday to Friday, and we'd have that one day to cross over, and we would share work. And how innovative was that idea? So I think that, I would encourage, and I am encouraged actually by a lot of the results that we're seeing with women in leadership, and also, not accepting the norm, but demanding in a positive way change. I would expect that we would have to see some modifications and some thinking outside of the box to create opportunities for women to continue to work under these circumstances. And I don't think we're there yet. I think there's a lot of good ideas that could come out.
Thanks, Kathy.
Sorry about that. A lot of good ideas.
And Shannon?
Yeah, I agree with what Kathy said. In my lawyer life, I was sitting on a call during the pandemic, and we were talking about work at home versus back in the office, and what are we going to do? And he said, he was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to say the right thing. He said, it bothers me that I get emails from women at 10:30 at night because I want them to have that balance. And I said, okay, just so that you understand, that is my balance, because often I've come home at 6:30 and I've had dinner with my family, and my balance is to work at night because that's how I can get the work done. And to me, it's just, again, being flexible. And I think that we have learned a lot. I know Keeneland has learned a lot in terms of how productive people can be when they're not sitting right at their desk. And I think those alternative work arrangements and working with people who have circumstances that require a different schedule, you just need to be open to that and flexible and find ways to help people be successful. The ones that want to stay in the workforce, I would say I have a lot of friends who aren't in the workforce, and I really respect that too. So I think it's a matter of finding what is important to a person and making those priorities, and as a company and as a business, giving them every opportunity to be successful.
And a final question for you both, slightly different. Shannon, what bright spots do you see for the future of the horse racing sport? And Kathy, you can either say what bright spots you see in the future of this sport or bright spots in general. Shannon, you go first.
Okay. I am so encouraged, as I said before, the resiliency and optimism just of human nature through all of this has been, if you told us a year ago that you might have to cancel your vacation because something went wrong, it would have seemed like a really massive issue. Right now you say, oh, that's all right. I knew I didn't have, we've just learned to react quickly and deal with things and be flexible and pivot. So I think that's going to help us make better decisions going forward. And I think, again, taking the best of our traditions and innovating is really exciting. I'm excited about digital sales. We're having a sale in April that could revolutionize the way we have our sales. We're not going to require the horses to be here on the grounds. They can be in New York, they can be in California, they can be in Florida, they can be in France, and we'll sell them with a live auctioneer here. And then with respect to the sport of racing itself, I think we've gained a lot of new fans, and I think people are going to be happy to get back to the track when they can get there, and we're going to be ready for them.
Well, Keeneland clearly in good hands with you, you at the helm. So thank you. And Kathy, right?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Shannon just said. Overall, generally, with the transition of having COVID and looking at things differently. I think that what COVID taught probably everybody is that there is no certainty. We don't necessarily know what's coming around the corner, and it's important to be flexible or thoughtful and be able to pivot, whatever that may be, and that there is, what we expect might not be what comes. So just to be able to manage that and plan for that in a sense. In terms of, I think that, at first it looked like sports was going to take a hit in terms of fan base or, not being able to have people in the stands and so forth. And I think that has changed very quickly because a lot of, the sports leagues and teams have really positioned themselves to pivot and be open to welcoming and inviting their fans in different ways. And I actually think that we're going to see more engagement from fans and continued strength in their engagement as we go forward as a result of COVID, because we all had to look at everything differently and make changes to address that.
Sports are such a uniting force, I feel like, and I think we've seen that through the pandemic.
I agree, and that I agree. That sort of coming together is such an important aspect of it. Shannon and Kath, thank you so much. I find you both so inspirational, and it was such an insightful discussion on both leadership and women in leadership and horse racing and the business of it and how you deconstructed that and how this space is changing. So thanks so much for a great conversation, and a special thank you to you, Kathy, Private Wealth Advisor at Morgan Stanley, for being our partner for this series. And Shannon, thanks so much for coming on. It was a wonderful conversation. And most importantly, thanks to everyone that joined us today. We will be sharing the replay in our newsletter on Sunday. Thank you for your great questions. We hope you enjoyed it. Please do share any feedback with us at community@worth.com. And join us for the next normal session, the next one being the week after next on Thursday, February 18th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will be discussing art in the digital age and how technology is transforming the way artists and art spaces bring work to life, with the founders of Art Tech House. You can register for this on worth.com/events. In the meantime, stay healthy, stay well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you both so much.
Thanks, Juliet. Thanks, Shannon.